morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Pankaj and Mayank. Uh, as you all know, we are talking about disruption, technology disruptions, and how it creates a value for the socio-economic and a virtuous circle of uh, value both for the ecosystem as well as the, the society. And it's interesting because these two gentlemen have a common background. Both of them are computer engineers. And while Mayank started after his computer engineering from sales and marketing and is now heading a technology company, Pankaj worked in the core engineering sector, development, innovation, and is now heading a non-technology product, lingerie. He's a CEO of a lingerie company and using very innovative approaches to market. So, in fact, if we look at it, the COVID itself, I would call, is a disruption, which led to further disruptions and new technology innovations. And so, just to bring the entire house at a common level, we'd like to understand from both of you what technology disruption and innovation actually means to you, Pankaj.
So I think it's a very wide domain when you call technology disruption. But I think to break it down, I think anything where technology plays a role to kind of accelerate or change the game to a whole different level, I think that's what disruption would effectively mean, right? Straight out of a dictionary. Uh, what we have seen, at least, what has happened in the COVID time, and we are a very interesting business. So we are a technology business because I think lingerie sits at the top of the pyramid when it comes to product technology, but yes, definitely not digital technology. Um, I think we saw 3, 4 very strong things happen, right? One was the supply chain. The supply chain was disrupted completely. So people had to innovate. A lot of offline businesses, they did not have enough products, so they had to figure out a way to optimize on it. So everybody kind of started investing a lot of energy in supply chain. The other disruption happened was with the customer. One was the behavior change, right? Because they went digital big time. But at the same time, they also started to get a lot more restless. Even though there was very less product, the customer was also very restless at the same time. They wanted things here and now. So that led to a logistic disruption. So I think there was a huge chain of, it was literally a dominoes effect where one thing fell, but other things started to actually climb up and started doing very well. I think one of the biggest things that we saw was the way the consumption started to change, right? And that has been phenomenal for us. For us, just to give you a very quick data point before I close my point, is that for us, tier 2, tier 3 business used to be approximately 40-45% of our business. I personally, when I say I, of course, I mean the management team, we were all very focused that the tier 2, tier 3 town of India has to change when consumption of lingerie has to come into play because, there's a lot of education that is required in our business. Post-COVID, this number went up to 63%. I think that's what we call a true disruption/transformation.
Thank you. Thanks, Pankaj. Mayank, could you elaborate on what technology disruptions means to you and the innovation? And
Sure. Thank you very much. So, as India's leading auto tech player, we operate in many different verticals, and we rely very heavily on technology as a backbone to serving our customers. We are in the used car space, we are in the financial services space, we are the largest lender of used car loans in the country. We help on new car assisted buying. We are also one of the largest players in the online insurance brokerage space. And what we saw, as Pankaj alluded to, the behavioral change during COVID, it was there was a marked shift where consumers who were sort of moving towards social mobility, there was a marked shift towards coming back towards personal mobility. I think people realized that owning a car and the safety, convenience, and comfort that brings with it, that came back in a big way. India auto market, we have about 22 cars in India for every 1,000 people. That's a very small number. If you compare that to China, that number is about 200 cars. And if you compare that to US, that number is about 750 cars. So I think one of the things we saw was this marked shift towards wanting to own a car and coming back into personal mobility. And the other change that we saw was that people wanted, contactless or a faceless experience. They wanted an end-to-end digital experience. And that was something that we were able to help facilitate. So for instance, in our financial services business, on the lending side, today we are able to issue a used car loan completely through a paperless 100% digital journey. So it's a matter of seconds where you are interfacing with our algorithm, and we are able to do an assessment, and within a few minutes you are able to get a used car loan. And I think that was a revelation for a lot of customers. That's something that helped us to gain about a 12% share on the used car lending side. There's still huge opportunity there, because if you look at the used car lending in India, only about 17% of customers in India actually are able to avail a loan when they're buying a used vehicle. That number is 75% in the advanced economies. So there's still huge opportunity. We believe that through these sort of technology enablers, we can help to grow that market and help more people gain access to lending.
Thanks, Mayank. Both of you guys actually touched upon a very important thing, the change in the user behavior. And the entire innovation or that you have been driving and leading is based on that, leveraging that change in behavior, and of course, how to service that and through the technology intervention. There's other thing that I want to understand, since we're talking technology disruption and how it creates a value in terms of the economic and the wealth value for the promoters, and also the social value. But just before that, to understand, since you guys are working as a technologist, now we have innovation, we have a need for meeting the social obligations and the purpose of business. How do you create a balance for this?
I think the real opportunity sits when the purpose of the business is catering to a certain need. Now, if you can be socially responsible while executing it, I think you've hit gold, right? And there are cases of social media companies who actually could have played that role, but they ended up kind of not doing it, right? So that I think is beyond a point, up to you as an organization of how far you want to go, how close you want to fly to the sun. But I think the real opportunity usually always sits when you are serving a certain need. And from our perspective, okay, let me talk about it very quickly from an anecdote basis, right? In our country, the biggest challenge is that 85% of the women, even today, this is 2022, don't even know the right size of bra to wear, right? And this came out of an insight, from my co-founder who said that, at the age of 25, also she did not know. And in 2015, when we had just launched the brand, we got this service done for an entire team in office, which was 70% women. 80% of them also did not know the right size while working for a company which makes lingerie. So I think that's the social. Now whether is it a social cause or whether it's a need of the end customer, I don't know, right? But we said that this is one opportunity of a business where you can also make a social impact, because the moment you get the right product to the person, you see a change in the way they live their life, the quality of life improves, the spondylitis pains go away, and you don't even realize that it's such a big impact to your life. So I think to cater to a need is something which, of course, every business has to figure out, because that's the only way to grow. But whether you will hit the right cause also in that process, I think, is hitting the jackpot, which some may or some may not happen. For us, we were very lucky that we were kind of, in the cusp of both. And that kind of gave us a reason to do what we are doing, which was much bigger in purpose than just, making an apparel product for the end consumer.
Thanks. Mayank, as we were discussing yesterday, and you mentioned about the IPO, forthcoming IPO that you are looking at and all. Now, from the social perspective and innovation, when we are talking about marrying together, ESG reporting and meeting the SDG objectives are a very key concern and for any business, and the social innovation that's happening. So as a business, how do you look at it? And how do you see the value proposition?
So, we've always built the company from the time we started around the customer, around the consumer. We are an auto tech company, but when we started building this company, we said, well, what is it that a customer today wants? He wants to buy a car. He buys a car, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years later, he's selling that car. He'd want a loan for that car. He'd want an insurance policy for that car. He'd want to maintain that car. So we've always kept the Indian customer at the core of our business and built all of these various businesses around it, which today provide a flywheel effect to our business and provide a moat to our business and provide amongst the lowest CAC that compared to most other businesses. But by keeping the customer at the core of our business, we've always been very conscious about providing value to that customer. And so, across our various businesses, for instance, as I mentioned in our used car lending business, by going completely paperless, we are very conscious of the fact that we are able to, in a responsible way, make an impact on our ESG goals. We take ESG very seriously. I think in today's day and age, every organization has to take it seriously. I think it's a responsibility for every organization. So while we are all in the business of making, delivering value to the customer and building profitable businesses and sustainable businesses, we also have to be conscious of our, larger responsibility in the ecosystem. Another example of one of the things that we are trying to do, which is good for business and also good for the environment, EVs, electric vehicles, as we know, are starting to come around. India is at the cusp of that adoption. We are helping to create India's first and largest EV marketplace. When that happens, we hope that that can bring about a dramatic change in the country, where we are able to move away from IC towards EV. So I think we've also been a little bit fortunate, as Pankaj said, that our business has been at that cusp of providing societal benefits. But also, in the way we run our business, we are also always very conscious about our responsibility towards ESG. And one of the benefits of that was that in our last funding round, we got funding from Leapfrog, which is a global investor that not only invests in companies looking at their financial models or their business growth opportunity, but also looks at their ESG impact and what they are trying to do around societal impact. So I think today it's good business for businesses to be good.
Thanks a lot, from bringing the investment part, I was about to come to it, but before that, another important thing, in the last 2 years, we have seen a lot of startups, particularly technology startups, and a lot of interventions, a lot of innovation happening. Now we have physics. While I was reading yesterday, a company from Kanpur becoming the latest 101 first unicorn. And a lot of companies are going for the IPO, creating value. Are you happy with the environment or the basic infrastructure for innovation? How satisfied are you?
So again, I think as a starting point is that, who are we to judge? I think that's the starting point. But at the same time, since it's a personal opinion being asked, so this is one thing I used to tell my team always, and in good times and bad, that every great story may not be a great business, but every great business is a great story. And I think that's the core fundamental of our existence all along, right? So, and another thing is that you can, physics and maths are two things that never lie, right? Gravity will play a role beyond a point, right? I mean, the numbers don't lie, however much you kind of, nudge them and try to coax them into something else. So as long as these two thumb rules stick to you, right, I think you will make a great value creation. And again, so if the valuation is coming out of value creation, it sustains. If valuation is coming out of a story, then beyond a point, it fizzles down. And frankly, I don't think entrepreneur has any role to play in this whole process. Entrepreneur is just running his journey. Entrepreneur is just doing what she believes in, right? It's the environment, and it's not today, it's not yesterday. It goes all the way back to documented Netherlands times of tulip effects, right? When people got all frenzied and started, engaging in tulips. So I think this is human tendency to kind of overvalue things and then again start judging that thing and then started undervaluing it. So I think to answer your question, I was just setting a background for that. I think from an environment perspective, phenomenal time for innovation because it's the frenzied times that bring in the money and it's the money that brings in the ability to innovate. So I think the frenzy has a role to play in making that social disorder, making that whole change, right? And some sort of a change always needs some sort of chaos to kick in. But having said that, I'm also documenting that it is a chaos, right? So I think it's okay to be chaotic at times, but over a period of time, maths and physics will hold up. So at least as entrepreneurs, you should focus on your maths and physics and let the story play around wherever it wants to play.
Mayank, your take, particularly, because you're targeting the IPO.
Yes.
How happy are you with the present frenzy and the chaos, as Pankaj mentioned?
I think I totally agree with Pankaj. I think investment climate is always cyclical. And so, if you are a fundamentally sound business with solid unit economics, with a great team, with a good product market fit, you will do well, irrespective of how the funding cycle, whether it's, boom or bust, or whether there's more liquidity or less liquidity. Of course, I think you have to adapt as well. And so times definitely are changing. I would say that it's not a bad thing, because sometimes what happens is when you get that frenzy and you get the capital, and that capital is required to invest and build businesses, things can sometimes also start going off the boil, and so you need to sort of turn off the gas a little bit at times. I don't think the gas will completely get shut. I don't think that's going to happen. India attracted over 30, I forget the exact number, but I think about $35 billion worth of investments last year in venture capital. Would we again see that sort of number, or would that number be lower? I think the India story will continue. I think there's a lot of opportunity in India. There are lots of talented people, lots of good ideas. But if you do sort of turn off the gas a little bit, it may not be a bad thing. We also know that when there's excess capital, that can start, creating its own problems. We've seen talent cost skyrocket, not just for companies like ours, but for all companies. We've seen cost of advertising skyrocket. We've just had IPL where, the cost per 10 second was at an all-time high. And so I think some of this is also healthy for the overall environment. But I think it's important for companies to adapt. And our belief, we've started 14 years back from very humble roots in Jaipur. For the first 6 years of our existence, we didn't spend a single marketing dollar. Our entire traffic was built organically, was completely free of charge. And when you build a company brick by brick with such strong fundamentals, you're able to weather any sort of cyclical environment. So we remain quite optimistic, but of course we have to adapt to the environment.
So you also talked about the kind of the bubble which earlier in the day the former telecom secretary Mr. Anshu Prakash mentioned that perhaps he cautioned that this might be a bubble which might burst. How do you see it? I mean, is it you kind of said that in a more subtle way?
Well, I'm not an investment expert or a finance expert, so I wouldn't know whether there's a bubble or there isn't a bubble. But what I do know is that investment climates are cyclical, and I think DataQuest, this is the 29th edition of DQ Conclave. I'm sure all the people who've been attending this over the years would have seen enough cycles come and go, and they would have seen great companies, get started and survive any sort of environment. So I'm not going to comment on whether there's a bubble or there isn't. I don't think I'm the expert on that.
Pankaj, your
I'm saying if I'm allowed a little bit of wordplay, I wouldn't say it's a bubble. I'd say it's froth. So so it's okay. Let the froth settle down. I think there is a huge amount of value that got created. EdTech, great example that you just gave. I think it is case in point, right? I mean, I started my EdTech company in 2006, and we raised a bunch of monies from all marquee investors. In 2012 is when we kind of had to sell it off just to recover the capital, right? Today, the same EdTech is playing a very, very different role. So it's also about timing, and the right timing got the right amount of capital. Of course, it will create a frenzy. But that doesn't mean that EdTech is not a reality, right? It is a reality as we speak. So I think that's a great example to say that should we call EdTech a bubble? I don't think it's a bubble, but should we call it overvalued? Absolutely overvalued. So I think it's not bubble, it's froth, and froth will settle, and you will definitely see a lot of water underneath.
Great. Thanks for bringing back to the technology part, since you mentioned edtech and all. I just wanted to understand in terms of, we talked about the valuation, how India market is. In terms of technology disruption, where do you see the country and the entire disruptions that are happening compared to rest of the world and rest of the Asia?
I think we can break it down into two parts. For example, if we call it e-commerce, I think we have nailed it. I think we are way ahead in e-commerce than the West at this point of time. And I have friends who would look at me and say, boss, 10-minute delivery? I mean, I would still have to rush to Costco. So I think a lot of changes have happened there. We are way ahead of our times. Of course, there are a lot of catching up that we have to do from within Asia. China is way ahead in live commerce, for example. We are still catching up, and it will catch up. So a lot of those things, of course, will happen. I think where we lack, and we lack terribly, is R&D. And I think that's where we always extract R&D from overseas, and then we build a brilliant product on it, right? So, but we are never the first movers. And that's because our talent, and for a long time, money was also overseas, and our talent also followed the money. But now that the money is here, thanks to the froth, I think there could be a very strong opportunity for R&D to happen.
Great. So there is a silver lining, as you say, in the froth. And your take on this, and how do you look at it from, particularly since you are also targeting the Asia, South Asia market?
Yeah. Well, so if you look at e-commerce, and as Pankaj rightly said, I think the sort of businesses, the sort of services, the deliveries that you get in India, you don't actually get in a lot of advanced economies. I used to live in UK for many years, and I look at fintech, for example. I think the infrastructure that today exists in India for startups like ours to be able to take advantage of that and build fantastic businesses in the fintech space, and used car lending, the business that we are building in our business, is just one example of that. Again, to friends who are in some of those advanced economies, they marvel at how easy it is for us to be able to do these digital payments. And I think it's a great enabler, not just in fintech, but for other businesses as well. But of course, there are areas, as I mentioned, for example, in our auto business, the number of cars that are in India, it's a highly supply chain constrained market, and is very much linked to the core economy. So when we look to go out of India, we've chosen to go to those countries where we see similar parallels, where we think that a similar sort of flywheel or ecosystem play will help us to bring value to those countries and build successful, sustainable businesses. So we've looked at emerging economies in Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines. Those are markets where we see a lot of parallel with what we've learned over the years in India, and we are able to bring those values there. In Indonesia, for instance, we today are responsible for about, or we control a 2.5% market share in their used car lending. I mentioned earlier that in India, that's 12%. For us. So, and we've been in these countries just for about a year or so. So I think huge opportunity for us there. And I think we'll continue to sort of take advantage of, as we build our businesses in India, to build similar businesses in some of these geographies.
So both of you have been kind of, also focusing on a bit of investments and all. Now, looking from that angle, and this we would conclude with this last question is, which are the 4 or 5 segments that you see a lot of innovation happening and a lot of value creation in terms of the, the startup ecosystem that they are doing? What would be your 3 or 4 picks, and why?
So I think in AI ML and big data, there's a lot of good work happening. There are some fantastic companies in India that are working. I think the R&D that Pankaj alluded to, I think there's a lot of good stuff happening there. But I think, yes, it's important for those companies to, it's how many patents are they able to create, and I think as they start investing more, I think we leverage AI ML in a big way. So for instance, that complete paperless journey, that's built on the back of an AI ML engine. Price discovery in used car, that's entirely built on the big data. We have about 100 million sessions every month on our site. And through that, our algorithm is able to learn and provide that service back. So I think AI ML, certainly. I think the other one will certainly be metaverse. There's a bit of hype around it, naturally. But I think It'll be a coming of age. We've all been hearing of virtual reality for so many years. When I was a computer engineer 20 years back, we used to hear of it. But I think the ecosystem may now be able to sort of, so I think that there may be a lot of opportunity for Indian firms, and that will sort of tie up with social and content and e-commerce. I think that play will start happening. I think those are the two areas that come to mind.
Pankaj, you mentioned, since you said 2012 you had to send an edtech company. Now, where would you put your pie in the present scenario?
See, right now, I think agritech is something where there's going to be a lot of opportunity because typically for the supply chain that exists, right, there is a lot of inefficiencies that are built in, and I think there is a lot of juice there. We'll probably see a unicorn very soon there. I think there are a lot of people who are already contending for that race. I think that's one big one. Other thing is, of course, being from the category that we are in, right? I mean, although I just hate the term D2C because, Fab India has been a D2C forever. It just became, very, very sexy right now, right? So, but I think this is the best time to be a product company and the best time to be a consumer because for once, everything was, dependent on distribution. Nobody talked product. Everybody talked about the touch points that you had. Today, what internet has done is that it has disrupted the whole ecosystem of distribution, which has gone out of the picture. Now it's a one-to-one mapping, and all of a sudden that has brought in a lot of opportunities for great products and a lot of opportunities for the customer to absorb and try a new product. So I think there's a lot of goodness that will be leveraged there, and very, very good products in multiple categories will continue to come up.
Great. Thanks a lot, Pankaj. Thanks, Mayank. It was really a pleasure interacting with you and understanding the ecosystem, including, how the entire value system is happening and the froth, I would say, not the bubble. So, thanks again. And we are able to close it in 11 seconds before. So, thanks for helping me out on that. Great. Thanks.
Thank you all. May I request Shubhendu sir to hand over mementos to our panelists?